Why didn't the United States initially bomb Tokyo, but instead Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Was it due to a lack of capability or were there other intentions? If those who were bombed were unlucky, what was it like for someone to be hit by an atomic bomb twice? Although this question might seem strange, if it really happened, one would want to know. To understand this, we need to start with a secret project. The Manhattan Project. This project involved a clandestine effort that would forever change the world. Due to the high level of secrecy, most workers were unaware of the project's ultimate goal, which we now know as the Manhattan Project. It was led by General Leslie Groves of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, with nuclear physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer overseeing the scientific aspects. Eventually, they selected a site in New Mexico, the former location of a private boys' school. Groves had no objections, and the renowned Los Alamos Laboratory was built on this land. Oppenheimer gathered the top physicists of the time, and they initially focused on a gun-type fission weapon codenamed Thin Man. However, by April 1944, they discovered that the plutonium's spontaneous fission rate was too high, potentially causing a premature explosion. Oppenheimer then proposed an alternative. An implosion-type weapon named Fat Man. They also continued development on a gun-type design using uranium-235, known as Little Boy. They were deeply concerned that the complex Fat Man design might fail. Therefore, they decided to conduct the first nuclear test before its formal use. Before the test, some scientists worried that the chain reaction might inadvertently destroy the Earth. This wasn't entirely unfounded. Theoretically, the high temperatures from a nuclear explosion could have caused a runaway fusion reaction in the atmosphere's nitrogen. However, the probability was deemed extremely low, and the decision was made to proceed with the test, codenamed Trinity, a name chosen by Oppenheimer himself. On the day of the test, 425 people were present, wearing dark goggles to protect their eyes from the intense flash. On the morning of July 16, 1945, at 5:29 a.m., the U.S. Army successfully detonated a nuclear weapon for the first time. The test involved an implosion-type plutonium device, nicknamed a gadget. Witnessing the explosion, Oppenheimer was deeply moved. He wondered if he had become Death, the destroyer of worlds. While he was still concerned about the nuclear weapons threat to the planet, Secretary of War Henry Stimson had already relayed news of the successful test to the Potsdam Conference. U.S. President Harry Truman, upon receiving Stimson's coded message, was greatly encouraged, as this news was crucial for the negotiations at Potsdam. When he casually mentioned the existence of the atomic bomb to Stalin, the Soviet leader showed no surprise, seemingly already aware. Truman hoped the U.S. would use this weapon effectively against Japan. The Potsdam Declaration was issued, informing Japan that it had no other choice but to surrender unconditionally. It demanded Japan eliminate the military's control over the government, limit Japanese sovereignty to the four main islands, and called for complete disarmament, emphasizing the protection of basic human rights. It also stipulated terms for economic reconstruction and outlined a path to autonomy under Allied occupation until these goals were met. The declaration concluded by demanding the Japanese government immediately declare its unconditional surrender, providing clear assurance of its good faith or face swift and utter destruction. At the time, the U.S. military dropped over 3 million leaflets on Japan, outlining the Potsdam Declaration. Foreign Minister Shigenori TMGM, a Class A war criminal, quickly convened a meeting with Prime Minister Kantorm Suzuki, also a Class A war criminal, and Chief Cabinet Secretary Hisatsune Sakamizu to discuss the declaration. Sakamizu noted that the cabinet generally believed acceptance was necessary, but TMGM argued that the terms regarding Japan's future government structure and disarmament were unacceptable. He hoped to negotiate with the Allied powers through the Soviet Union and revise the terms. Their discussion yielded no resolution. Subsequently, TMGM approached Emperor Hirohito to reconsider the declaration and delay a response until the Soviet Union's position became clear. The Soviet Union indicated a principal acceptance of the declaration. However, at the same time, the Japanese Supreme War Council convened. Army General Korechika Anami, Navy Chief of Staff Somu Toyoda, and Army Chief of Staff Yoshijiro Miyamezu, all Class A war criminals and key figures in the invasion of China, insisted that the declaration explicitly guaranteed the emperor's status. It's unclear what gave them such confidence to make such demands. Ultimately, they couldn't reach an agreement and adopted TMGM's proposal to delay a formal response. Japan's attitude towards the declaration was effectively one of ignoring it. The Americans interpreted this silence as a rejection, leading to the decision to implement the principle of complete destruction. Tokyo had already been severely damaged by incendiary bomb air raids, diminishing its value as a target for demonstrating the atomic bomb's destructive power. Moreover, Tokyo was the location of the emperor and the Japanese high command. Preserving these figures was crucial for negotiation and facilitating surrender. Therefore, Tokyo was removed from the target list. Hiroshima, Kokura, and Nagasaki were selected because they shared common characteristics. Large urban areas and significant military installations. Hiroshima, in particular, was a major Japanese port and troop assembly point, as well as a crucial industrial center producing aircraft, shipbuilding materials, and bomb components. Initially, local residents in Hiroshima wondered why their city hadn't been bombed like others. One theory suggested the US intentionally spared it to occupy it as a future military base. Others speculated that Japanese Americans in Hawaii might have pleaded for their ancestral home to be spared. On August 6, 1945, at 2:45 a.m., a formation consisting of the B-29 Enola Gay, piloted by Paul Tibbets, and two other B-29s, the Great Artiste, carrying instruments to record the explosion data, and number 90, later renamed Necessary Evil, for photography, rendezvoused at 5:55 a.m. and flew towards Japan. The mission commander, Tibbets, had witnessed 4 B-29s catch fire and crash during takeoff, so he was particularly concerned about the bomb detonating prematurely and destroying his plane. Therefore, he decided to arm the bomb in the air. His assistant, Jepson, removed the safety plugs 30 minutes before reaching the target area. The Enola Gay arrived over Hiroshima at 8:09 a.m. local time, initiated the magnetic arming sequence, and handed control to Bombardier Thomas Fearby. At 8:15 a.m., Little Boy, carrying 64 kilograms of uranium-235, was dropped from an altitude of approximately 9,450 meters. It detonated 44.4 seconds later at an altitude of 580 meters over Hiroshima. At the moment of detonation, the fireball's internal temperature exceeded 1 million degrees Celsius. This extreme heat, generated by the nuclear fission reaction, caused a fireball to expand rapidly, reaching a diameter of 280 meters within 1 second. The thermal radiation released by the fireball caused the ground temperature to instantly rise to 4,000 degrees centigrade, far exceeding the ignition point of most organic materials. This led to Hiroshima instantly erupting in flames, which, under the influence of crosswinds, spread across 11 square kilometers. Although the B-29 bomber was equipped with a Norden bomb sight, it ultimately detonated almost directly over Shima Hospital. Some scholars later suggested that a more precise aim might have reduced civilian casualties. Before this, the crew of the Enola Gay, except for Tibbets and Fearby, were unaware of the bomb's true nature. They were only told there would be a bright flash and were instructed to wear protective goggles. A Tokyo-based controller for the public broadcasting television network, after discovering that the Hiroshima broadcasting station had gone silent, attempted to re-establish contact via other telephone lines, but also failed. Approximately 20 minutes later, a message arrived at the Tokyo Railway Telegraph Railway Station, stating that a massive explosion had occurred in Hiroshima. This information was relayed to the Imperial Japanese Army General Staff Headquarters. The military repeatedly tried to contact the Hiroshima garrison, but received no response. The General Staff initially dismissed the reports of a large explosion, as they hadn't received any records of a large-scale air raid, and Hiroshima at the time did not have significant stockpiles of explosives. Subsequently, a young officer was dispatched to Hiroshima to investigate. After a 3-hour flight, this officer observed a massive cloud of smoke from a distance of 160 kilometers from Hiroshima. He circled the area for observation before landing south of Hiroshima. It wasn't until 1600 hours that he reported to Tokyo that a new type of bomb had been used, causing the widespread destruction. Later, Japanese physicist Yoshio Nishina and others arrived in Hiroshima to survey the damage, confirming that it was caused by an atomic bomb and reporting this to the cabinet. However, the Japanese cabinet, still clinging to hope, decided to continue the war. Navy Chief of Staff Somu Toyoda speculated that the US likely had only 1 or 2 atomic bombs and therefore advocated for continuing the war. President Truman, upon returning from Potsdam, stated that the US would continue to use atomic bombs to bomb Japan until its ability to wage war was completely destroyed. As Japan still showed no signs of surrender, the US launched an attack on another Japanese city on August 9. At 3:47 a.m. that day, Major Charles Sweeney piloted the B-29 Boxcar, carrying the Fat Man bomb, from Tinian Island. The Boxcar was escorted by the Great Artiste and the Big Stink. The primary target was Kokura, with Nagasaki as the backup. Before takeoff, ground crew discovered a malfunction in the Boxcar's fuel pump, but Sweeney decided to risk continuing the mission. After reaching the rendezvous point, they waited for the other escort plane, which failed to appear due to an incorrect flight altitude and communication loss. Sweeney waited for 40 minutes before proceeding without it. Upon reaching Kokura, Sweeney found the entire city shrouded in smoke, intentionally created by the Iwata Steel Works burning coal tar, obscuring 70% of the target area. 3 bombing runs with visual aiming all failed. At this point, Sweeney faced a critical fuel shortage. He reportedly thought, if I can't bomb you, can't I bomb someone else? and turned towards Nagasaki. After leaving Kokura, the crew decided that if Nagasaki was also obscured, they would drop the bomb into the sea near Okinawa. At 11:01 am, a brief break in the clouds allowed the bombardier to lock onto the Nagasaki industrial area. The Fat Man bomb detonated at an altitude of 503 meters over Nagasaki, approximately 3 kilometers off the intended target. The blast yield was equivalent to 21 kilotons of TNT. Unfortunately, the hilly terrain limited the extent of the damage, but the fireball's central temperature still reached millions of degrees Celsius. Everything within a 1-mile radius was vaporized, and tens of thousands more subsequently died from radiation sickness. Among the survivors of the Nagasaki bombing, approximately 200,000 had no idea they would be subjected to a second nuclear attack. 9 survivors claimed to have been in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the bombings. It's hard to say whether they were incredibly lucky or incredibly unlucky who survives 2 atomic bombings. One such individual, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, was officially recognized as a double atomic bomb survivor. He was in Hiroshima on a business trip when little boy detonated and died of stomach cancer in 2010. Hours before the Boxer dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. This news instantly shattered Japan's last flickering hope of negotiating peace through the Soviets. A group of hardline military officers attempted a coup d'etat, but the cabinet was already divided. On the morning of August 9, a meeting of the Big Six convened. The hardliners Anami, Umezu, and Toyota argued for continuing the war, while the pragmatists TMGM, Shigenori, and Yanai Mitsumasa advocated for unconditional acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration. When no one could persuade the others, Prime Minister Suzuki asked Emperor Hirohito to make a decision. Late on August 9 and into the early hours of August 10, the emperor made the unprecedented decision to accept the Allied terms. Afterwards, Army Minister Anami, a staunch advocate for continuing the war, committed ritual suicide, seppuku, after signing the surrender documents, leaving a note that arrogantly stated he was atoning for his failures and comforting the spirits of the war dead. In a postscript, the narrator apologized for his negative remarks about Anami. Hiroshima bombing pilot Paul Tibbets met with Mitsuo Fuchida, the commander of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Tibbets said, "You guys really scared us at Pearl Harbor. We had no idea we'd be attacked like that morning." Fuchida reportedly replied, "Well, wasn't what you did at Hiroshima even more shocking?" Tibbets conceded, "You have a point, but you did the right thing." The Japanese at that time were completely fanatical. If the US had invaded Japan, every man, woman, and child would have fought with bamboo spears and stones. Regarding the earlier statement about little boy missing its target but the damage being insignificant, Fuchida's response implies that any atomic bombing would be devastating, regardless of minor inaccuracies.